Attention so we can start the program. I'm standing in for Adam Posen today. He's unavoidably on the road, but I'm delighted to do so because it gives me the opportunity to introduce not one, but two very old and close friends. We have an unusually rich program today, so I want to get started right away. This is the 11th annual Whitman Lecture here at the Institute. It's one of our most valued series. We've had a number of very distinguished speakers like Mario Monti, Martin Wolf, Mohammed El-Arian, and a whole group of luminaries, none, I should say, as luminous as today's speaker, Yongding. All this series is due to the generosity of Marina and Robert Whitman, long-standing friends, colleagues, and supporters of the Institute. I want to say a couple of words about Marina Whitman because she is stepping down from our board of directors now after having been on it for 25 plus years. Marina, as those of you who've known her career know, is a rare triple threat. Marina has been an outstanding academic economist, professor at leading universities, still at the University of Michigan, published widely on a whole range of international economic topics and a few others. She was also a very high-level corporate executive, a senior vice president and group executive at General Motors for many years, and she had a distinguished career in public service. We first met when she was a senior staff member at the Council of Economic Advisors, and she later became a member of the council and has done much public service since in a variety of advisory capacities. As I say, Marina's been a member of our board since 1987. She is now stepping down, and I really want to say what a great pleasure it has been to work closely with her. Now, I mentioned Adam Posen is not here in person, but he is here in a short video, and so he now wants to add his words of thanks to Marina.
Dear Marina, I am so happy that we are able to use the 14th annual Marina and Bob Whitman Lecture at the Peterson Institute for International Economics as an opportunity to thank you, to honor you, to show our appreciation for all you've done for the Institute as a board member, as a member of our advisory committee, and most of all, as someone of great wisdom and commitment to substance. You've just been a wonderful role model for many of us at the Institute. You've provided enormous advice to me, and I know to Fred in the past, and you've just been a pillar of our community. This is because you're someone who never holds back on speaking what you believe to be true, never holds back on asking a good practical question, whether it's on our audit committee, our board of directors, or on a specific study. But you do so in the context of wanting to maintain an institution and help it thrive. That's visible in the way you and Bob have endowed this lecture series and made it such a great thing, and I'm delighted that you, Yongding, our great friend from China and wise academic like you, could speak here today. It pains me that I'm not with you. I'm off on Institute business, as you know always has to come first. But I just want to reiterate that Marina Whitman has been the perfect director and the perfect counselor to many of us here at the Institute. You keep us on a path of substance and a path of intellectual honesty that we're all committed to, and we look forward to having you as an active participant in the Institute, now a very honored one by our standards, in the years to come. Thank you.
And now, on behalf of the board of directors of the Institute, Marina, if you'll come up, we have this little plaque, which has a bunch of whereases, most of which I've already enunciated.
Bob says it won't fit in his seat.
Well, if you want us to skip it, we can probably do that. But in any event, I want to show everybody the punchline is, be it therefore resolved, the board of directors of the Peterson Institute for International Economics extends its deepest appreciation to Marina von Neumann-Whitman for her loyal and devoted commitment to making the Institute one of the most respected and most successful, we think tanks in the world. Marina, thanks and congratulations for everything.
a total surprise to me. I guess it's because they finally regularized the terms of membership on the board of directors. So my 25-year term has ended. I figure they'll probably still let me come. And I must say, my long association with this organization has been and will continue to be one of the delights of my life. I got to know Fred when we were both very young puppies in the White House, and it's a relationship I have treasured ever since. And I thank Adam in absentia for his downright embarrassingly complimentary comments on the video. Thanks ever so much for coming, and I know how much you're all looking forward to hearing our featured speakers.
Thank you, Marina. Now I get to introduce my second good friend, Yongding. Those of you who know Yongding know that he is not only one of the best economists in China, which he certainly is, but he's also one of the most candid and courageous economists. Yongding is a very modest person personally, so he would never say it himself, but he in fact tells it like it is. And as we know, that's not always the case with folks coming from China and talking about the economy. Yongding has one of the most distinguished records of any economist in China. He's a senior fellow at CAS, the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. For many years, he headed up the Institute of World Economics and Politics there. He's editor-in-chief of China and World Economy, one of the leading journals published in China. He's been a member of advisory committees to practically every major governmental body in China, the National Development and Reform Committee, the Advisory Committee on Foreign Policy to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He gave the lead remarks in a session that top Chinese economists had with President Xi Jinping's party just before they came to the U.S. last week. Yongding led that off, gave advice on what they should be pursuing in their relations with the United States and their economic policy more broadly. So he's that rare combination of intellectual excellence, intellectual honesty, and deep involvement and influence in the policy process in his native China, which of course is now so central to all of us and to the world economy as a whole. Like with Marina, I've had an opportunity to know Yongding for a long time, probably 25 years. We were reminiscing about that, saw each other frequently at Davos and Beijing and conferences all over the world. And it is truly an honor. I think of all the great speakers we've had in the Whitman Lecture Series, Yongding probably even tops the list. And it's a really deep honor, Yongding, to welcome you to our podium again and to introduce you to this audience today. Yongding.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you, Fred, for your very kind introduction. I don't think I deserve such complimentary remarks, and just ordinary Chinese economist. I try my best to be honest. And I would like to start by thanking PIE for this kind invitation. It's a real privilege, honor for me to be able to give a presentation on Chinese economy. And I also want to use this opportunity to express my admiration and respect to Professor Whitman. Thank you very much. And I hope this afternoon's short presentation about China's financial stability can make some humble contribution to your understanding of China's current economic situation. After 30 years breaking very high growth rate, Chinese economy now is entering a new stage, which was characterized in China's new normal. Even though most Chinese economists and people would not know, this phrase is coined by a Westerner, CEO of Pinko, and Mr. Mohammed Rin. But anyway, for Chinese economists, the most important characteristic of this new stage is a significant slowdown of China's growth potential. Many years ago, we are used to talk about 10%. Now we are settled at something like 7, even lower than 7. So I think this is the most important feature of the new stage of the Chinese economy. In short run, I think the defining feature of the Chinese economy is deflation. I think China now is in a state of deflation. China has been running negative PPI for 42 months. Even though China's CPI is still positive, but the PPI has been in negative territory for more than 42 months. And the situation, I think, is worsening. So I think Chinese economy in the short run will get worse before getting better. I'm still confident in Chinese economy. And my confidence is based on my experience. Over the past 30 years, Chinese economy has all been able to muddle through. When I was younger, I always tend to predict a disaster coming. And each time I was wrong. Then since 1995, I changed my position. I said, China will be okay. Now, so far, I'm still good. And 10 years ago, I took a bet with a very close friend of mine. I said to her, a lady, within 10 years, Chinese economy will be okay. So early this year, I came to her and to say I should collect my money. She said, wait a moment. I say by the end of 2015, we still have many months to go. You have to wait. So I'm still waiting. So, of course, this is general situation. Now I want to talk something more specific. That's China's financial situation. Actually, my title of the speech is China's Financial Instability and Recent Turbulence. And because I have some problem with my side, I don't know whether I can see everything clearly. You see, China's possible financial crisis has been a very hot topic for many years. After global financial crisis, lots of people are talking about coming financial crisis, and these are major topics. In 2012, I think mainly three. One is crash of a real estate bubble. The second one is local government debt. The third one is underground credit network. Actually, this is a small piece of summarized in 2012 was taken from my speech in New York Stock Exchange. In 2012, I talked about this. I told them, you don't need to worry. And then the situation changed. In 2013, we started to talk about the shadow banking activities. Of course, we still talk about local government financial vehicle, corporate debt, the property bubble. And then in 2014 and 2015, each year there are lots of hot topics, but these topics are changing. Some topics just disappeared. For example, underground network, nobody mentioned this. And until last year, shadow banking activities was a very hot topic. But this year, I think in China at least, very few people are paying attention to this issue. For me, there are three very important issues I think we should pay great attention. Number one is corporate debt. Number two is stock price bubble. This is not very important issue, but this is interesting issue, so I'm going to talk about this. The third one is China's exchange rate. This is a very crucial issue, even though this issue has not have a great impact on the Chinese economy yet. So let me talk about the first issue. The rise in China's corporate debt to GDP ratio. I think this is a very key issue in medium and long term. It imposes most serious threat to China's financial stability. Of course, I'm not saying this will cause a financial crisis, a debt crisis very soon, because China is a high-saving country. China has still have a huge government-owned assets government can sell. And also, we still have a very large foreign exchange reserves and so on. So the situation is bad, but how bad it is, I don't know. And what I can say is that since financial crisis, China's corporate debt has been rising steadily and rapidly. According to Standard & Poor's, China's corporate debt in terms of volume is the #1 in the world, much larger than the United States' corporate debt. And according to Standard & Poor's, China's corporate debt over GDP ratio is 160%. The Chinese Economy Social Sciences also did a study. We found the figure perhaps a little bit too high, but still, according to CAS, the recent figure is that China's corporate debt over GDP ratio is more than 145%. Not very, very high compared with other countries, but in terms of absolute amount, it's the #1 in the world. So the problem for us is that will China's corporate debt to GDP ratio continue to rise until it blows up? I think this is a more fundamental issue. High is a problem, but how about the trend of this corporate debt over GDP ratio is more important one. You can see from this chart, corporate debt over GDP ratio have been rising very fast, steadily. From 120%, now it's 240%. Okay, so the trend in the past is very, very high. So we did some study about this, and we used some differential equations and some other mathematical method, try to figure out what will be the trajectory of China's corporate debt over GDP ratio. I don't think I need to go into the detail. This is a fundamental, basic formula we use to describe China's corporate debt dynamics. What we need to pay attention is that these 5 parameters are most important factors which will decide the trajectory of China's corporate debt over GDP ratio. One is capital output ratio. This is a measurement of capital efficiency. The second one is growth rate. The third one is the share of equity finance. The fourth is interest rate, and the last one is inflation rate. All these are very important in determining China's corporate debt dynamics. And so what is the situation of those parameters? It's very easy to recognize that China's capital efficiency is low and falling. China's corporate profitability has been falling steadily. And share of finance via capital market, very low in China. Interest rate on loan still high, and inflation rate is not that high, and inflation measured in PPI is negative, and the growth target is still high. All these factors, all these parameters and variables are not in favor of a stable trajectory of a corporate debt over GDP ratio. So let's see from this chart. This is the trajectory of China's capital output ratio. And I think here, this part is prediction. These are historical figures. We make prediction over to 2013. This is the key part. We want to see what will be the trajectory based on historical data, will be the capital output ratio. The conclusion is not very good. At this moment, China's capital output ratio is more than 3, and rather high. And the incremental capital output ratio is 6.8 or 7. This is extremely high, which shows that China's capital efficiency is very low. Why we have such a high capital output ratio, basically, is that why China's capital intensity has been increasing very rapidly. You see here. very rapidly. We invest more and more. But the labor productivity increase lag behind. So this is the fundamental reason why China has a very high capital output ratio and why China's capital efficiency is so low. So this is the trajectory of capital output ratio. So another important variable, as I mentioned, is the trajectory of corporate profitability. From here, these are predictions, right? These are historic figures. You can see very clearly China's corporate profitability has been dropping steadily and quite fast. Now, the average profitability of China's corporate is just something like 6%. Okay, very low. For some industries, for example, steel industries, negative or zero. And in 2012, I was told that two-ton profits of steel products just can buy one lollipop. Last year, situation is better. It can buy a bottle of water. Okay. And here's the equity finance to GDP ratio. Chinese government try to promote the development of a capital market so that the enterprise can raise funds from share market. Unfortunately, the share from this capital market is still very low, lower than 1%. Early this year, situation become much better. Of course, you know, situation certainly reversed, fall back. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is that this equity finance to GDP ratio is low and I don't know what will be what its figure will be in the future, but perhaps it's still quite low. Another important thing is interest rate on loans. And here, this is the historical figures, not the prediction. It's still very low. Last year and this year, Premier Li Keqiang emphasized the importance of lowering the credit cost. But unfortunately, even this loans, the interest rate on loans has been decreased a little bit, but still very high, 6%. As I mentioned, you remember China's corporate profitability is something like 6%, and the credit on average, this is the weighted average, is something like 6. So you can see how profitable China's corporate actually is. After calculating all those trends and make some extrapolation, then we started to make our simulation based on the formula I just presented. Actually, it's quite complicated, but the basic idea is very simple. We, based on those parameters and use differential equations and some other mathematical method, we were able to do some simulation. This is our simulation of corporate debt to GDP ratio following the passage of time. Here is a crucial figure here. You see, this is 200% this year, 2020 to 2021. If there's no fundamental changes, structural changes, if all those the trends of parameters maintained, then within 5 years, China's corporate debt over GDP ratio will be 200%. And the tricky thing is that previously, when we are doing some other simulation, we can find sort of a converge to a limit. But in China's case, the corporate debt to GDP ratio will not converge to any limit, which implies that this system is unstable, explosive. Somehow, somewhere, the system will collapse, but we don't know when. But what we know is that this ratio will continue to rise unless you do something to stop this trend. And so this is my basic conclusion that in the medium and long run, the most serious threat to China's economic stability, financial stability, perhaps is corporate debt. But as a caveat, I should point out that nobody knows when this threat holds. And in 90s, and we talk about Japan's government debt over GDP ratio. At the time, I think in 1998, I talked with the officials from Ministry of Finance in Japan. They told me that they are very worried because Japan's public debt over GDP ratio is already 80%. It will increase to 90%. So we have to do something. Otherwise, Japanese economy will be in big trouble. After 20 years efforts, now the ratio of public debt to GDP is more than 250%, right? But they still survived. So I don't know. But anyway, this is something we have to pay good attention to. Okay, let me turn to another topic, and a more interesting topic, stock market turbulence. You see, I quote, sorry, this should be changed. This is a spelling mistake. Oh yeah, bond, okay, it's all right. Yeah, okay, and this is quote from Patrick, a friend of mine. He said, he called this American IG. He commented on Vietnam War. He said, in order to save the city, we destroy the city. Okay, so this is the story over the past 7 months. To be honest, I don't think stock exchange turbulence is a very serious problem for China in terms of financial stability. Because as I just mentioned, corporate finance on the whole does not rely on share market. I mean, the share of the finance through capital market is still very limited in China. But it brings doubt to authorities' ability to manage a crisis. And people will have doubt. Why you bungled, right? This is not that big deal. Why you make such a mess? So indirect implication is serious. This is this is a chart about this Shanghai Stock Exchange Composite Index. Actually, in 2007, we faced a more serious situation. It shot up to 6,000, then dropped to actually dropped here, less than 2,000. So this is a very big upheaval. At the time, I was very worried. Actually, I wrote a letter to authority saying that we should do something before the stock exchange crash. Otherwise, several hundred million Chinese will go to the street to demonstrate, just like what we have seen in Taiwan. They lost money, so they staged demonstration, demanded the recognition of the Minister of Finance, Madam Guo, in Taiwan. That happened in the 80s. So at the time, I fear this can happen in China, so I wrote a letter to the authority. But actually, after the crash, nothing happened. So Chinese are very nice people. They are very nice. But this time, the situation is changing. I mean, this is sort of crash, okay, from 5,000 to 3,000. But when the share fall to something like 4,000, monetary authority and security regulatory authority scared, and they did a lot of things to intervene and so on. So this is ongoing business, has not finished yet. Let me talk a little bit more about this. And basically, there are 3 stages. And the first stage happened in the later 2014. The starting point of this stock exchange bubble, the starting point is 2,500. This is quite low in China, but this is index level kept for quite a few years. Languished, people are not happy, but it's okay, right? But certainly, this stock share and the stock price shoot up. So this is the second stage. This is the peak. It becomes 5,000, just something like 5,000. So in short, in 7 months, the share price shoot up by 2,500. So increased by more than 100%. Just in 7 months. That is crazy. That is crazy. And in China, actually, most Chinese economists, I think 90%, even more, they thought that this is a bubble. Because as I mentioned, the Chinese economy has entered into deflation. All the major indicators are not that good. So why this share price shoot up so dramatically? And so we don't believe this soaring price have any fundamental support. But most Chinese economies kept quiet, including me, because we don't want to be blamed to pop the bubble. If you say something and the price dropped, then you'll be blamed for lack of confidence in Chinese economy so size. Lack of confidence in Chinese economy. So we keep our mouth shut. I think I should confess this is a mistake. I should say something earlier. But anyway, everybody in China, almost all Chinese economists knows this is a bubble. But unfortunately and unusually, People's Daily make big voice saying this is not a bubble. And 4,000 is a starting point of a new bull market. We were very angry. Actually, we talked with those guys, why you are publishing this kind of thing? They said, I don't know, I'm not responsible for that. Who knows? But anyway, they sending out the signals to encourage investors to continue to invest. I think this is highly irresponsible, and it's very problematic. I think sooner or later, and people will ask them to answer the question, why at that time you wrote such thing? But anyway, and after more than 5,000 points, then suddenly this bubble burst, the price collapsed. And I think the first issue we need to ask is how was this bubble created? I think this has something to do with the government. They have a good intention. As I said, corporate is deep in debt. So they want to use capital market to reduce the burden of corporate debt. But they have went too far. And they took some artificial actions to promote this bubble. I think because they are too, too impatient, so they create certain mess. And this government policy. So these are major, more important policies adopted by the Chinese government, not just in 2014, but also before 2014, say in 2012, 2013, and since the global financial crisis, they tried their best to promote this development of stock exchanges. The most important measures taken in China is margin trading. Previously, this is forbidden in China. But since, I think, since 2012, this was allowed and encouraged. It became quite popular, and especially during this round of equity bubble. Margin trading was widely used. Here are the 7 most important channels by which margin trading is financed. Because it's very technical, we don't have time to discuss this. I spend lots of time to understand what's the trick or all these kind of channels. Quite complicated, but for Americans, they are not complicated. We learn this from Americans. We try our best to learn, to import American system to China. Sometimes we make a mess. Okay, so these are margin trading. This margin financing play a very important role for the crash of this share market. So in middle of 2015, Security Regulatory Commission become scared because they thought, how come this share price rise so fast? They thought that they should do something. Then they did something. They decided to restrict offline private funding matching. You borrow money from outside the financial system, from some rich people and so on, the leverage ratio is very high. Sometimes the leverage is as high as 1 to 5 times. So they use this leverage. So China Security Regulatory Commission decided that this practice should be restricted. You know, this bubbling stock prices actually having no foundation, economic foundation. Even those speculators, those small investors, they invest, they thought the government will guarantee and so on, but they also sometimes very suspicious about the sustainability of this rise in share prices. So suddenly they found the Security Regulatory Commission has taken some action, so they scared. And so they started to sell, because the role of the margin trading. When you sell, the situation will become very bad, because you borrow lots of money, so you have to there's a margin call. Because of the margin call, because the price has fallen, because of the margin call. So your stock will be sold by stock exchanges, which push down the price level and so on. So this fall is accelerated, dramatic. So we see this price fall from more than 5,000 very quickly to 4,000 and so on. Actually, this is something I think quite normal. You should not really scared about this sort of fall in prices. Actually, Security Regulatory Authority came out to say that this is a very natural course of a correction. They said that. But very soon they scared. So they usher in a very large amount of policies trying to stop this crash. And these are most important measures. You see the first one, stop IPO. We want to raise money from share market, they stop IPO. You are not allowed to raise money from IPO. Everybody can buy, but you cannot sell. Or if you want to sell, you'll be discouraged, so on and so forth. And so they try to stabilize the price. The result is that you save the city, you destroy the city. You change lots of rules of game. So it's difficult for China in foreseeable future to raise large amount of money from share market, because investors become scared about invest in these stock exchanges, because you can change the rules very quickly. So I think the fundamental impact will be very deep, even though immediate result on Chinese economy is not that big. Chinese economy will not really be impacted greatly by this fall of share prices. The last question I want to ask in relation with this fall of a stock exchange is that where money come from? Where money come from? Even you borrow money, if you use leverage, but you have to, there must be money, right? So I think my conclusion is that because after global financial crisis, China's bank credit has been increasing very rapidly. China still uses a 10% growth rate. So the monetary policy is aimed at to support this 10% growth rate, sometimes even overreacted. So the credit increase is dramatic, so lots of money. And the real economy, as I said, is not that good. Profitability is low. So where money come from? Come to. Money fail to come to real economy. Money first come to real estate market to drive up the prices of houses. Then come down on housing bubble. Then they shift to shadow banking activities. They try to buy all sorts of the financial assets. So they drive up the assets of financial assets. And then government come down on shadow banking activity. Then the money go to share market, even though the share market was not in good shape. And so my question is, what's next? This bubble bursts, then where money will go? So the last question, the exchange rate reform. And this in August 11, People's Bank of China take initiative to try to reform China's China's exchange rate formulation mechanism, and at the same time devalued by 19%. This triggers a lot of things, triggers certain panic. Okay, so previously, before this August 11th episode, exchange rate issue was not very high on agenda. But certainly it became a very central issue. People pay great attention to this issue. I think exchange rate perhaps is more important than the share market crash in terms of its impact on China's long-term growth, the impact on global economy. So I will spend a little bit of time to talk about this. What is the so-called reform, the change of the exchange rate mechanism declared by People's Bank of China on 11th August? Basically, you see here, this is August 10, before the reform. This is a central party rate set by PBOC. Okay, each day they will set a central party exchange rate. This is called daily fix. By what rule they set, nobody knows. Anyway, they said this. Okay, this is the central party rate on August 10. And then in 11, they declared that, and they will shift. First, they shift this daily fixing, this central rate, by 1.9%. This is a devaluation from here to here. This is central rate. More importantly, they declare that in the future, market makers should base their offering price on the closing price of exchange rate, which means that, for example, in August 11, this is the central rate set by PBOC. Then in market, the closing price, if the closing price is here, if the closing price is this, then in next day, this price will be the central rate on August 12, right? So you see, when they raise this central rate, immediately exchange rate devalued to this level, almost 2%. There's ban. The exchange rate will not be allowed to devalue by more than 2% a day. So it almost hit the edge here. So this become the central rate the next day. And then in August 12, market rate further devalued by almost 2%. Go to here. So you have to reset the central rate for August 13, something here. If these kind of things continued, you can see every day exchange rate will devalue by something like 2%. So within 10 days, exchange rate will devalue by 20%. This is quite scary. So enough is enough. So People's Bank of China come out in August 13 saying that this is just one of adjustment of exchange rate, because according to the calculation, maybe according to IMF's calculation, China's exchange rate is overvalued by 3%. So we have devalued more than 3%. So it's fine. So we will not allow RMB to continue to devalue. So they started to intervene again heavily. So you see, in the next few days, there's no further devaluation. You see, this market rate is almost exactly the same as the central rate. Why? Because of intervention. How they intervene here, you can see from this chart. You see, this is central rate. Then next day, immediately, as soon as the market is open, devaluation, further devaluation. Then this is by the afternoon. The market is going to be closed. Then People's Bank of China enter into the market to push up exchange rate from here to here, so that next day the central rate can be set here. Otherwise, next day central rate will be set here. So you can see very obviously there's heavy intervention by People's Bank of China. They buy foreign exchange reserves. So they are doing this until now. As a result, in August, in 1 month alone, they spent more than 90 billion. Some say 100 billion US dollars. Just in 1 month, China has huge foreign exchange reserve, something like more than 3 trillion. But I think a few years, you can use up all your foreign exchange reserves if you continue to intervene in this way. So the question is where the application pressure will persist, or this is just a sort of one-off situation. And the fact told us, actually China's exchange rate, the trend has changed. And we have been talking about undervaluation of RMB exchange rate for something like 10 years. After 10 years, the situation changed. China's real exchange rate appreciated greatly. China's current account surplus reduced, and more importantly, China's capital account deficit increased dramatically. Over the past 20 years, China run twin surplus, current account surplus, capital account surplus. Now capital account surplus become quite large, and current account surplus becomes smaller. So in 2015, second quarter, China run twin surplus, twin deficit, capital account deficit and the current account deficit. So of course, RMB devaluation pressure will occur from time to time. From here, you can see this is China's capital account. You see here, very dramatic fall since the second quarter of 2014. This is current account surplus. We still have current account surplus, decent current account surplus, but capital account deficit becomes so big. So of course, there will be pressure on RMB devaluation. Okay. So the next question, the causes of capital account deficit. Due to time constraint, I cannot elaborate, but these are some summaries. Unwinding of carry trade. You see the strategy of Chinese monetary authority since 2005 is gradual appreciation. When you are doing gradual appreciation, and carry trade will become rampant. So they earn lots of money, speculators. They ride on this appreciation. And, but now situation changed. Appreciation expectations become devaluation expectations. And also because China is suffering deflation, People's Bank of China has been loosening, and it will lose even further. At the same time, Federal Reserve is talking about the exit. So carry trade unwinding become very serious. And also diversification of financial assets by household and so on is become very significant. In China, everybody can convert 50,000 US dollars a year. But at least China, there are 20 million rich people, at least, middle class. So if everybody want to implement this right, so in 1 year, there will be $1 trillion flow out of China. So situation could be serious. And also outbound foreign investment become very large, and also capital flight, and so on. And in short, the currency structure of China's international assets and liability are undergoing adjustment because exchange rate expectation changed, and also because of the interest spread. Okay, I'm finishing soon. So the thing is, how much ammunition China still have? Yes, we still have a lot, but it can be used up very soon. Okay, and so what should China do? Option. So there are options we are discussing in China. My view is very simple. China should stop intervention and let RMB to flow, and it will solve lots of problems. And this is a very key policy which will help China to speed up economic structure adjustment, speed up the shift of its growth paradigm. It will change its way of resource allocation and make China's economic growth more sustainable. make China's resource allocation more rational, and which will also very helpful for China to solve its corporate debt programs and so on and so forth. Anyway, in my view, to reform China's exchange rate regime is a key issue Chinese government has to deal with as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yongding, thank you very much. You've given us obviously a huge amount to chew on. Let me just start with a couple of questions, hopefully of general interest, and then we'll open it up to the group. Just picking up on your last point. For many years, I think, you have recommended that China let the exchange rate float in response to market forces. And to your great credit, you were doing it back in the days when the pressure was upward and would have moved the RMB up. So no one would accuse you of trying to promote competitive devaluation. But let me ask the question. Suppose China did let the exchange rate float freely and the capital outflow persisted so that the RMB were to depreciate.
Right.
Ask you two unanswerable questions. One, how far do you think it might depreciate? And two, what would be the effect on the current account surplus, which, as you indicated, is already pretty large, and in the kind of slow growth world economy we have, might put considerable pressure on the rest of the world?
Okay, I think these are two questions easy to answer.
Good.
Number one is that there will be appreciation, devaluation, but this devaluation will not be that big because China is still running very big current account surplus. And secondly, China still have a capital account control. So these are two important factors you have to take into consideration. Of course, I have to admit that there will be overshooting, especially in the initial stage. It can go beyond 10%, even 20%, but just temporary. And then it will rebound. And also, there is a secret weapon in my mind. And because we still have a huge amount of foreign exchange reserves. We don't waste these foreign exchange reserves, intervene early on, one bit by one bit. We saved all those ammunition. If really this devaluation will break, say, 20 or 25%, it will harm the economy, it will cause huge capital outflow, then you intervene. And then this intervention will be effective. So I'm not too worried about this dramatic drop of RMB exchange rate if People's Bank of China stop intervention. Secondly, in China, no one really very serious about the effectiveness of lower exchange rate on export. In China, because the export structure is quite peculiar. Pulsating trade. Occupy a very high share. And also, China has been involved in this global value chain and so on. So the price formulation and the effect of price on export and import is quite complicated. No one expects that devaluation will have a big impact on China's export.
Okay, I hope you're right. I'm sure there'll be some further questions on that. Let me go to another topic which you mentioned right at the start of your lecture and push you a little bit, since you're willing to make forecasts.
Okay.
You said at the outset that you thought the growth rate would decline, of course, considerably from the 10% of the past, but you indicated some confidence that it would stay kind of in the 6 to 7% range.
Yeah.
Would you elaborate on that a little bit? You pointed to this big problem of corporate debt. The exchange rate, as you say, is now maybe a bit unstable. So give us your expectations. This is obviously a huge question for the world economy.
Yeah.
Since China is now so big, talk about stock market reactions. Our own stock market reacts very dramatically to perceived changes in China and the outlook in China. So very important for everybody. So give us a little more elaboration on how you see China's growth rate in the short run, say the next year or two, in the medium run, say 5 years, and over the long run, out beyond that. How do you see all this panning out in terms of a bottom line growth rate for China?
With regard to long-term growth rate, growth potential, lots of Chinese economists, especially those econometricians, they did very careful calculation. You know, there's a very important economic forecasting organization, conference board, right? I think the most important research fellows in charge of calculating China's growth potential is a Chinese. And Mr. Wu and his excellent expert on this issue has been doing this for 30 years. And according to all those very authoritative Chinese economists, China's growth potential should be something like 10% in foreseeable future, because China's growth rate, the labor productivity, so far still 7%. A few years ago, more than 12% or something. It's falling. Now it's something like 7%. Maybe now it's even a little bit lower. We don't know yet. This is one thing. And the growth rate of the labor supply, because the shrinking working age population is a problem. But it's still something like zero or a little bit positive than zero. So this is very basic formula. Growth potential should be equal to the growth rate of labor productivity plus the growth rate of labor supply. So by mean this measurement, and so we still confident it should be something like 7%. Then also we can use another growth theory model. That is, the growth rate is equal to investment divided by capital output ratio. Even capital output ratio is 7% or 6%, but China is still high saving country. And the saving rate is more than 45% of GDP. So 45 divided by 7 or 6 or something, you still can roughly get something like 7%. Then of course, finally people want to calculate this total factor productivity. This is very low, but still not a big deal for China to maintain 6 to 7%. And one of very important factors is that China is still a poor country. China's per capita income is just $8,000. It shows that there's tremendous room for China to grow further. And there's urbanization, education, so on and so forth. China has so many problems. Another side of the coin is that because you have so many problems, if you can solve this problem, so you can continue to grow. In the United States, everything is perfect, so which means there will be less room for you to improve.
One final question, then we open it up. You stressed in your remarks the low efficiency of capital.
Yes.
In China.
Yeah.
Why is that? Is it a fact? Is it an element of the absence of liberalization of the financial system so that capital allocation is not carried out effectively? What's the reason for the low efficiency of capital, and what's the way to improve that to then get total factor productivity, everything else up, and buttress your growth forecast?
I think this is really a very comprehensive, difficult question for me to answer. You need to write a report. I think the World Bank write this report, and they identify lots of problems. And if you solve this problem, you can maintain a decent growth. In my view, this including issues at different levels. For example, economic system. This is also a wide category, which includes ownership, whether you have a very strong, clear protection of private ownership, and how you deal with state-owned enterprises, how you can prevent those managers from state-owned enterprise to do asset stripping, right? And also, this is at this level. And if, because I'm not a politician, I will not talk politics. Beyond this, they still have some in Marxist terminology, superstructure. They also have room to improve, right? So from this level down to resource allocation. One of the most important things is that China's growth pattern is problematic. For many years, it's investment-driven and export-driven. And give you one example which shows China's resource allocation is so how poor. China now has 5 trillion foreign assets, 5 trillion. We have 3 trillion foreign liabilities. So we have 2 trillion foreign net assets. So we should earn something, right? But each year, China's investment income is a deficit. And 80 billion, 50 billion, 60 billion, over the past decade. And in contrast, in the United States, you have 5 trillion net assets, liability against the rest of the world. You earn positive investment income. So you said you are exporting dark matter. Who is importing dark matter? China, right? Why China is importing? One very important reason is exchange rate distortion. If we change exchange rate policy, situation will be much better. China will run less current account surplus because China is a poor country, but China become a net capital exporting country since 1991, when China's per capita income is $400. You have 40,000 US dollars. We lend money to you. You give a negative return or 1 or 2% return. And your investment in China in 2008, according to Cannes Conference Board, American multinationals' average investment income in return in China is 33%. And David did the investigation. I always try to embarrass David. He led this World Bank team to do investigation. According to their research, for multinational in general, the average return is 22%. If I'm wrong, please, David, correct me. So this is misallocation of resources. So you have to make this change. Of course, China should, promote the initiative, private sector's initiative, innovation creation, and this is very important. We have seen some spring sprout in Shenzhen in some areas. I think if Chinese government really can adopt the right policy to promote this kind of development, and the Chinese economy really will overcome short-term problems and to improve its resource allocation, to improve capital efficiency.
Final question from here. You've been advocating those kinds of policy changes for a long time,
Yes.
as have many of us here, and finally it seems to be happening, slowly but happening. But the final question to you from me, are the reforms that have been announced to rectify the situation, are those reforms irreversible? Are they now certain to be implemented?
Everything.
Because as you know, a number of people here worry that things might go into reverse, that if the reforms don't pay off with the growth rate, that then there'll be a reversion to the bad old ways, more role for the state. There's a really significant minority, I would say, that takes that view in this country. Tell us about the prospect for carrying the reforms through, even if it doesn't look so good for a while.
To be honest, I can't guarantee 100%. It will, there will be no possibility to reverse. Everything can be reversed unless you are going to die, right? So, but the likelihood is not high, because China has experienced 30 years of reform. And ordinary Chinese benefited greatly. Everybody knows the importance, the benefit of reform. I think it's very, very difficult. Anybody try to reverse the policies. You see, even during later 90s, even after such big event in China, reform actually accelerated, rather reversed. Now we are facing much less problem compared with that kind of situation. So why we cannot believe that China's reform and opening up will carry on continuously?
Okay, the floor is open. We've got a traveling mic. Please announce yourself and fire away. Will Martin?
Thank you very much, Professor Yu. One question, I wonder if you believe that exchange rate undervaluation has been a contributor to China's phenomenal export growth. And a related question, the unusual nature of China's VAT that imposes export taxes through partial refunds of VAT. I wonder how important that's been in slowing down China's export growth.
Sorry, I'm not expert in this area. I just can give you a rough answer. I don't think it's a very important thing in China. Unfortunately, I'm not expert in this particular issue. Sorry.
Okay, there was a lady over here. Yes.
Thanks. Tara Rice, U.S. Treasury Department. So I was quite alarmed by your simulation of corporate debt to GDP. It was very interesting. So here in the U.S., we've been talking about the potential that the corporate debt market in China has for development, but it seems to be a conundrum. On the one hand, if we have more development in China in the corporate debt market, there could be enhanced market monitoring, and this could then perhaps alter the way that corporations then are borrowing. But on the other hand, it could produce just more credit. And so how do you look at the balance between the development in the corporate debt market and the leverage of the corporations? Thank you.
I think these are two separate issues. On the one hand, certainly China should develop this corporate debt market. Actually, this market has been developing very rapidly. And on the other hand, we should not allow this corporate leverage to increase so dramatically, right? So these are separate issues. On the one hand, we try our best to develop the corporate market, but on the other hand, we should improve efficiency and taking lots of measures to slow down this leverage ratio. Otherwise, Chinese economy will be in trouble. But as I want to emphasize, this is a medium and longer run issue. You will not feel, immediate threat of this corporate debt. But the people are starting to talk about the danger because defaults will increase. And this will have an impact on China's commercial banks. This is the most important. Anything which will have an impact on commercial banks, anything which will increase non-performing loan, it will be dangerous because China's financial system actually is driven by banking market, banking system. This is the key.
Question in the back.
Yes, thank you. Nicolas Veron, here at the Institute, also at Brooklyn, Brussels. Thank you, Professor Yu, for the remarkable presentation. Actually, my question builds up on Tara Rice's question and also Fred's both final questions. And this is about defaults in Chinese corporations, because the impression of outside observers in the past few quarters or even years has been that the Chinese government has been willing to introduce gradually more market discipline in credit by allowing firms to fail, but it's very timid, and most firms that fail, especially state-owned enterprises, are bailed out, and therefore there is no good pricing for credit risk. So my question is this: do you think that the events of the last few months will accelerate or block the Chinese leadership's willingness to tolerate default and non-repayment of loans by especially state-owned borrowers?
I think this is really a very good question. And I don't have answer. I even think the leadership is still thinking about this issue because it is very delicate. They know in economic terms, you should not encourage moral hazard. But on the other hand, they are politicians. They pay good attention to social stability. So sometimes, in order to calm down the situation, they would like to sacrifice some long-term objective, just like in any country, maybe also in the United States. But I want to say that non-performing loan now is on the rise, and it will accelerate. It's very worrying. So far, everything is under lid. We don't know yet. But according to my personal contact, situation is not very good. Following this slowdown of the growth, this situation will be very, very serious. But as I have said, China still have some room to play, and it's still affordable for Chinese governments to scrounge some resources in order to save ourselves, but no more in the future.
Time for one more question. Pierre, go ahead. Peter.
Thank you, Fred. Peter Botelli at Johns Hopkins SAIS. Nice to meet you again, Professor Yu. I'd like to come back to Fred's third question about the apparent decline in the efficiency of capital in China. It's a little puzzling to me. I know the statistics and you confirm them in your charts, but we also observe, and I think this institute more than most has emphasized the importance of private enterprise, especially in recent years. Private enterprise, private investment now accounts for well over half of total investment in China. And private investment is supposed to be more efficient than public investment. So what's going on? Why do we continue to show decline efficiency in capital, whereas the share of private investment in the total package is rising so much? Could it be that we are at the end of this period of declining efficiency in capital, and that from now on we see rising efficiency and declining ICORs again?
I think this is also a very good question. Unfortunately, when we are doing our simulation, we didn't separate enterprise into different categories to see what are the specific features of a different category of corporates. So you raise very good questions. I think we need to go back to do more research on this regard. And secondly, I agree. Your points is very important. According to my student who are working in the State Planning Commission, they did lots of investigation in south part of China, in coastal area, especially in Shenzhen, in Guangdong. They found lots of very good private enterprises. They are doing very good job. So now we have two trends. On the one trend, some old-fashioned dinosaurs. They are still occupying a quite large chunk of resources. They are doing poorly. Not all of them, many of them. But on the other hand, we see some smaller but very energetic private entrepreneurs. They are doing very good jobs. For example, in IT area, China has been doing very well. And so it's difficult because it's difficult to measure. But certainly you can find the so-called innovative or creative economy. It becomes mainstay of Chinese economic growth. If this happens, then we will be very optimistic. We should be very optimistic about China's economic future. But we don't know because by definition, they are full of uncertainty. But hopefully, this sector will play a very important role. Private, smaller, high-tech, and this kind of enterprise will play a more important role. And Chinese government's policy should geared to provide support to those. This is also a policy emphasized by Premier Li Keqiang. I hope he will be successful.
I know there are several more questions, and I apologize to those whom I can't call on because we've reached our witching hour. I want to thank Yongding enormously. I want to again thank Marina and Bob Whitman for enabling this wonderful series to continue with Yongding today. And thank you more broadly for all you've done in the past for making this possible. Thanks to the audience. Again, many thanks.
Thank you.
Yongding Yu. Meeting adjourned. Great to have seen you all.